what is it, Big Brother and the Holding Company, holding it strong at 97.
No,
Yeah,
90,
speaking
98.
Or 98. My math is terrible. Right, there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, speaking of psychedelic rock, we've got Big Brother and the Holding Company, one of the probably founding bands for this psychedelic jam band, psychedelic rock subgenre, I should say. Starting, this album was released in August of 1968. The album is called Cheap Thrills, and Big Brother and the Holding Company is the band that Janis Joplin was in until she went solo for about a year until she died in October of 1970. So I think that's really the most notable thing about this band was that Janis Joplin was the lead singer of it. I really enjoyed listening to this album, and I didn't know Janis Joplin was the lead singer of the band until I started listening to the album. And while I don't always like psychedelic rock, I really liked this album, and this was a good first album for me because it combined all these sludgy blues sounds, and then it would veer into people tripping on drugs and just jamming out and stuff like that. And so this band made me think of those other more contemporary blues rock bands like the Black Keys and Jack White. And then when they started to veer into that psychedelic territory, that's where the album or where the songs got a little long for me. But overall, I really like this album, and I think it's well worth a listen. The album, some facts about the album. This is the band's second album. They had released a first album under this small record label called Mainstream, which was based out of Chicago and was primarily known for jazz artists. And then they really hit it big or gained popularity and notoriety when they performed at the Monterey Pop Festival in 1967. And then they switched record labels to Columbia, which was the album, a record label of a lot of artists popular artists at that time. I think Bob Dylan was with Columbia. I think I read that.
He was, yes.
And so I really recommend watching the Monterey Pop Festival performance. They have the D.A. Pennebaker made a documentary about the Monterey Pop Festival. It's got Jimi Hendrix performance. It's got a Who performance. It's got Otis Redding's famous performance by him. Criterion has a great edition out of the Monterey Pop Festival, and it's streaming on HBO Max as well if you have that new service. And I mean, that really captures for me what made this band special, and especially what made Janis Joplin special. She truly was one of a kind, and her voice was so powerful for such a small lady. There was nobody like her, at least for a long time, and you can see why she was so influential. Some other facts about this. This album was number one on the chart for 8 weeks, not consecutively, but back and forth. It was originally released with only the first 7 songs that is on the album. If you're looking on Spotify or any other service, and then they later went back and added more songs. And when I was listening to the album, I thought, well, was this album recorded live somewhere? And it turns out that some of the songs were recorded during some shows in Michigan.
I think it was only one song was live, is my understanding, and the rest of it just had souped up effects to make it seem like a live album.
Yeah,
that seems to be what I read. Yeah.
Yeah, Ball and Chain was recorded live at the Winterland Ballroom in San Francisco from a concert earlier that year in '68, and then some of the other songs that said they were performed at the Grand Ballroom in Detroit. So
Gotcha.
I kind of like that raw feel of it. You get the crowd noise and the energy from that. The only other thing that I wanted to add in terms of facts was that this album was initially titled Sex, Dope, and Cheap Thrills, but the record label wanted them to shorten it to
wonder
maybe
why.
being too controversial. And then the album cover art was done by Art Crumb, who is a famous indie comic book artist. And he has a distinct style, so if you know him, you'll know the cover as soon as you see it or recognize his style. But what did you guys think of the album? I didn't know anything about them, but what are your thoughts?
I didn't like you, Josh. I was like, who's freaking Big Ben and the Holding Company or what is this? What's going on? And then I was like listening to, so I had no idea, and I didn't know Janis Joplin. I didn't know that was her band. I had, I think years ago when I was maybe in college, I got Janis Joplin's Greatest Hits, so I knew some of the songs. I mean, some of the songs from that are from this album, like Summertime and Piece of My Heart, which is probably her biggest known song.
Definitely.
So I was surprised at that. I was like, that's probably something I should have known, and I didn't. So that was kind of nice to find out. I should like this album more than I do. I think there are two main reasons why it's good. And I think that there's some really cool parts going on. The musicianship is great. I think the song, what is it? Oh Sweet Mary stood out to me as a song that I really liked. I have always liked Piece of My Heart, but I don't know. Like it's kind of interesting that this is the same episode as talking about Dylan, but whereas I think that both Dylan and Joplin have what you would call as distinct voices, and I could see why people would love, or hate either of them. I love Dylan's voice. I hate Janis Joplin's voice. I just don't. It's powerful, and I think maybe I would like it more. I was thinking about this when I was listening to the album, that maybe I would feel differently if I saw her live, because I think that would be insane based on what I was hearing. But I think that this was just something that just didn't translate to me and didn't hit well with me. Her voice annoys me, I think, overall. And I also felt it's a very dated sound. I felt like it sounded like the background singing sounded like stuff that I heard from the Grateful Dead, which I've always been kind of meh on. And I do love blues rock, like Jack White, the White Stripes, the Black Keys. I do like that garage blues rock, which this pretty much is. So I can only attribute it to her voice and the production / just the overall sound, which is very 60s. It's very psychedelic 60s. I don't even know if I would say psychedelic, but it's just very 60s rock.
Absolutely.
And as soon as you hear it, you're like 1968, boom. Yep. It's like not even a question. And I love 60s music. I don't know. This didn't really resonate with me. And it's one of those confounding things where it's just a gut thing. I'm not a Joplin fan, I guess.
Yeah.
So
it's like when I agree with you about that sound of the 60s, because I wrote that down. It sounds like the music they would play in a movie when like soldiers in Vietnam were in a helicopter and like CCR is playing, or that sort of thing.
Or like in Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco, it's like that's totally, which is where they were from, so It's like that's exactly what it was.
Yeah. What did you think, John?
I totally disagree with both of you. And I hope there's older heads listening to this and are saying, who are these people? Because how you can listen to Janis Joplin and not hear her as one of the best female. It's just, I've heard this album 20 to 25 times between having a father who loved it, going to a school where, lots of hippies and like roots rock guys, jam band people. And obviously, this is some of the first jam band music I've heard, but unlike a lot of jam band music I've listened to, this is good jam band music. Like stuff you can listen to at a party and not want to blow your brains out. Like, it's just, yeah. I do not, everybody's entitled to their opinion and mine is no right than others, but there is a 3-song sequence here, songs 2 through 4, I Need a Man to
Yes.
Love, Summertime, and Peace in My Heart, which it's almost all 10 of 10s. And alone, that makes this a recommend. But yeah, I really, it does sound like 1968, but I'll tell you what, that's not a bad thing in this case. It's of a moment, and I know that sometimes of a moment doesn't translate, but in this case, I kind of want it to be in the moment of 1968 if it sounded like this. So I would say for me, total different feel. Love Janis Joplin's voice. Love the emotional connection. Was great. I love the music, and the bass lines are great. The drumming. I love how they put different stuff. It would be very easy for Janis Joplin to drown out the other pieces of it, but it doesn't. It doesn't feel like she, for me, takes over from the other pieces of it. The one thing I will say I hate it, and I hate this about so many 60s albums, is the use of sound effects. I don't know what was going on in the 60s where they felt the need to have to insert sound effects. You heard like clinking ice and to give the live effect, and this album was good enough without needing that. They had live songs later on the Spotify version that I listened to, Catch Me Daddy, Magic of Love in Detroit, and you got to hear what it sounded like to actually play live, and there's no clinking glasses or ice, so it actually made it even more ridiculous. But that's my only quibble with this album.
And let me be clear though, because I am not saying Joplin doesn't have a good voice. I think that I get the appeal, and she's insane, right? And that's why I'm saying, like, I would like to see this, because I think that I would have a different opinion of this if I saw it live. And I think that the musicianship was great. I think it's great. I just don't. It's weird. I'm holding two different ideas in my head at the same time. Like, I just don't know. It's not hitting me the way that I feel like it either should or that I would like it to. So it's probably not something that I would go back to if I want to hear, like a blues rock, garage rock. There's plenty of other stuff that I like that I would go to. I don't see myself going back to, like an album from, with that kind of 60s, sound, which in and of itself isn't bad, but I just feel like it hits me in other ways with, like Jack White and the White Stripes, and that stuff is just that's the first stuff that comes to mind, is like, that's what I really like. So I think it's great. I just don't, I don't know, maybe I need to listen to it more. Maybe I needed to hear it at a different time. Maybe I needed to hear this, in a certain circumstance, but just, it's not there.
Yeah, this album made me like want to dance or move while listening to it. I did really enjoy seeing them perform, and she was definitely somebody who burned bright for such a short life. And like you said, Matt, the Grateful Dead was a contemporary of them in the San Francisco music scene. Them and Jefferson Airplane were like the big three acts at the foundation of San Francisco psych rock. So maybe to John's point, like maybe you just like those initial, they're like the proto or the foundational psych rock band. So maybe that's what you're responding to.
Well, and a lot of times you can say Rolling Stone hated it. And a lot of times the 60s for me, I can almost cite what I'm going to like and what I don't like by what Rolling Stone liked and didn't like. And Rolling Stone, I think everything that Rolling Stone hated about it is everything that comes out to me. And because we're not going to get really a chance to talk about Janis Joplin again, I don't think she doesn't show back up in the top 100. I want to say this. A lot of 60s rock was built for certain audiences. And it's sort of been revisited as, music you could do drugs to, or music that was of the era. Like, I can't stress enough how much, and we mentioned Jefferson Airplane, and Grace Slick would actually fall in this as well, but there was no one singing about sex and raw sexuality and female empowerment like Janis Joplin was. And this album sounds sexy. It just sounds visceral, and it's so, I think it was so unique for rock to have that, because you definitely saw in things like jazz and R&B that women had that space, especially in African American music. But in rock was very much that when they let the women in, the women had certain roles, and Janis Joplin, she was able to bring it. And just this album sounds like a lot of things, but it sounds like female sexuality as well. And I think I can guarantee you that a lot of critics hearing that who were overwhelmed, and I'm not going all woke, because you'll know I'm probably the least woke person here, but I think you have to give this its due, in that this is a true female artist sort of carving out a niche of what a woman who wants to be like the guys, you know what I mean? Have a rock and roll lifestyle sounds like. So, Yep. But I just love that Rolling Stone said it was poorly recorded and not Janis Joplin at her best, despite this only being Janis Joplin's second album. And also, like, I would say one thing. How do you hear Piece of, like, what represents Janis Joplin's best if it's not Piece of My Heart? Like, come on. And this is where, like, you have to, like, just roll your eyes at some of this stuff.
Yeah, that album
that's
was
ridiculous.
Short, but like way off in terms of its perspective.
I mean, we'll talk about Led Zeppelin later, who is a band that I like but don't love. But, you know, of course, some of the most notorious, ridiculous reviews of all time are basically Led Zeppelin's entire catalog by Rolling Stone. And it's a lot of the same thing, like a lot of folks thinking they have the zeitgeist but not having it. And so while this didn't age well, it was the zeitgeist at the time. And, you know, when you talk to people at the time, they say, like I said, I've listened to this album so often, and I don't want to stop listening. Will I pick it up just on the random? Probably not. But will I ever not want to hear this album if it's on, even if it is, like Pat said, in the background of a 60s themed party? I will not. I would love it. So call me the contrarian on this one.
I don't think you're. Yeah, I mean it's great.
I think we all. Yeah, it's just my things. Like I said, it's just. I agree with all those things, and I think that the history and the context, again, like we talked about before, is nothing to ignore. And I have utmost respect for her. I get it. But I don't get it I get it objectively, not subjectively, I guess. Gotcha. And I wish I did, because it sounds. I'm listening to him like, why don't I like this? It seems like it's got a lot of elements, but it's just one of those things that I can't really put my finger on it. And maybe I need more exposure. Maybe that's it. Sometimes it's just, maybe it takes a while to hit. But that's just kind of how I felt when I was listening to it.
There can't be sacred cows, and I think that's there's trolling, right? People taking unpopular opinion, but then there's also having an opinion that's different. And I respect the fact that you have it, because I know you're not just looking for a troll or something like that along the way. And it's better to say that than to try to alibi if you don't feel it, because you feel like you need the alibi, And so I respect your.
Well, one thing I will never do either is, some people I know, I will never go, oh, Janis Joplin sucks. I don't take my opinion of something and be like, oh, this person sucks because of that. Like, if I think they suck, I think they suck objectively. So no, I think
is that
she's
a podcast?
Great.
Is that a podcast motto right there? When we think something sucks, it sucks objectively. That's maybe if you add that in. It's the cover art stuff. Yeah.
And I think to wrap up too, all three of these albums tonight were released so close to each other, within a year on either side, right? And so even that is showing you how diverse this 60s music rock scene was at the time. Because I think all three of these artists were pretty different. So.
Absolutely. So I guess in wrapping it up, guys, what would you let's go with I'll put you on the spot right now for each of the albums. A recommend, an avoid, or a thumbs in the middle. Let's use that as the grading scale. Townes Van Zandt. Josh, what would you say?
I'd say a thumbs in the middle at this point.
Gotcha. How about you, Matt?
I mean, personally, I think it's a thumbs in the middle. I think it totally depends on where you're coming from. I like it. But I think that for some people, it's not going to resonate at all. I think people would hate. I think there's a good amount of people that would hate it, actually.
I'm going to give it a thumbs up. I don't know. My gut tells me, and I could absolutely be wrong. My gut tells me there's more people that will like this than dislike it. But that's what's going to be interesting, because I look forward to maybe playing after this conversation. Now I'm kind of curious to play it for some folks that might not be familiar, to kind of see what their